And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? Welcome. What brings you here?
My wife.
Did it take a lot of convincing, or what?
No, chicken pot pie.
That's it's always bribed with something.
Bribery before.
Before.
Yeah.
How was it? Pretty good?
Amazing.
Yeah. All right. Well, glad you're here. Yes. What else? Anybody here? First time? In the back?
Yes.
Yes. Hi. Welcome. What brings you here?
It's a popular place to be. I see some people I know.
Oh,
I meet with friends.
Yeah?
Yes.
Nice. Why?
Because I am trying to develop some better life skills. And yes.
Better life skills. That's good. What's wrong with your life skills now?
I don't react very well to the world.
Yeah. Oh, to the world. Okay, so we're gonna work on changing your reaction to the entire world. Good. I just like to know what I'm up against here. First time as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. What brings you here?
I'd like to learn more about Buddhism.
Yeah. What do you know much about it at all?
I've read some books, but I don't know a lot about the real life practice.
Yeah. That's kind of all that matters.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's good. Well, glad you're here. Yeah, it's real life practice. I mean, that's what this is. Without real life practice, it's just some other thing we're reading about and listening to, and looking at Instagram reels about, and posting things and sharing words, and Thich Nhat Hanh's and Dalai Lama's everywhere, and Pema Chodron's. But what about our lives? And that's really what this practice is about, is what is your life like on a day-to-day basis? And are you calm and pleasant and peaceful and enjoying life, or are you sad and angry and miserable and pissed off and stressed out all day long? And sadly, that's the category that a lot of people end up in. And so this practice really is about figuring out, how do we take these very fundamental, pretty basic teachings. And it's funny, the longer I sit with this, it's almost like the simplicity of these teachings just become even more crystal clear and simple. Meaning that the more you study and learn about Buddhism can often complicate things. And there's so many people who come into Buddhism reading lots of stuff, and then we think, okay, well, if we want to learn about something, where do you go? Well, you read books, you look on the internet, you watch Instagram posts, right? I mean, this is how we learn stuff. But then that's almost like we're adding more and more and more knowledge in more and more ways. And I just think the longer I go with this practice, the easier it becomes to understand. That doesn't mean it's easier to do, but the easier it is to understand the very basic teachings that do not change. And as they say, the Buddha taught the same thing, 84,000 different paths, 84,000 different ways. He just said the same thing over and over and over again. Because he understood that there were, again, it's just kind of a metaphor, 84,000 different types of people. And so we all respond to different teachings and different practices differently. But ultimately, it's about how do we take what we know, which is very simple with learning about Buddhism. I could sum up Buddhism in 5 minutes. And that's all you would need to know to practice the rest of your life. Not even 5 minutes. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. Done. You can all go home, right, before the sun even sets, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And just spend the rest of your life thinking good thoughts, speaking good words, and doing good deeds. That sums up the teachings. That's it. So with that, we'll sit. We'll do a meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you for showing up. Feel free to introduce yourself as you are. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin, especially for those who might be new. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You're going to hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside, phones ring, people cough. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you do just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Again, if you are new, you're not going to shut your mind off. You're not going to go blank. You're not trying to think nothing. Your mind will continue to race. I'll say things periodically to remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to the present moment. Or maybe you've fallen asleep and I'll say things just to kind of wake you up, which is okay as well. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, feel them fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from your practice. Just sitting. Breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness and quiet. just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. mind, learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, the practice of meditation, to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, a racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from, what you believe in, where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different. from how you responded to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, but with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, running to meditation doesn't fix that. Because you're just going to go back to your life that's a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess. Meditation helps you become aware of what you think and what you say and what you do that is creating a life that is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess. So you can then begin to make changes. There's no need to feel the way most people feel all day long. Truly is not. But most people don't feel pleasant all day long. They feel incredibly unpleasant. The Buddha often referred to pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. With our thoughts and our emotions and everything that arises and passes, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And sadly, much of our days for many people is filled with unpleasant. And that's really unpleasant. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do in each moment. And that's it. We spend so much time trying to fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us. Hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. There's so much time spent on the actions of others. And the actions of others are important. They impact us. But this practice is not about changing the actions of others. This practice is about changing the actions of you. And then you begin from that place. So with that, I'll pause. I always really prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. For those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. Thank you for showing up. Feel free to say hello. If you have any questions, put them on the chat box, and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll open up to questions.
Why is it so hard?
Why is this so hard? I don't know. I don't know. You know? Yeah, so the question, those who didn't hear it, if you're virtual, maybe didn't hear it, the question was simply, why is this so hard? You know, I don't know. I think that, you know, for me as a practitioner, looking at how this practice has influenced and impacted my life, if I reflect back on it now to when I was really miserable, you know, I mean, the practice in and of itself is still hard. Everything I said at the beginning about, you know, it's really simple. I truly believe that. It is really simple. The teachings are really simple. Very, very simple. Really hard to do. But our life doesn't have to be so hard. And so when I think back to when I was really miserable, the practice isn't any easier now than it was then. But now I can be very pleasant and joyful and happy with everything that's going on, even the misery. So there's a difference there. Practice hasn't changed. But my mental, emotional state while practicing has drastically changed, no matter how miserable a situation is. And the question is, why? And how do we make that shift? I think for me personally, which is really the best thing I can, you know, I try not to do too much about my personal stuff, but is You know, it's funny because I almost started to share this right before I opened up for questions. And then my thought was, I'm not going to share this. It'll probably come up in a question somehow. And it did. So I was at today a place called the V, which is a retirement community up in La Jolla, really beautiful space. And I go up there every month, or actually every other month, and do meditation and discussion. And I was asked to talk about the way it was put to me was, stopping to smell the roses and the senses and learning to appreciate things. And so it was really kind of funny, especially for those who sit, in the Sunday Heart Sutra class. I, in essence, did the exact opposite, which to me was really funny and perfect, to do the exact opposite of what the Heart Sutra talks about. And the Heart Sutra, in essence, is talking about guarding and becoming aware of our senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The sixth sense being the mind and the consciousness. And how all of our senses and our sensations, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, how that determines everything we think and say and do throughout our entire day. Everything we see, everything we hear, everything we smell, everything we taste, and everything we touch. That all bubbles up into our consciousness and our thought. And that determines our mental and emotional state. And so the question was, in essence, posed to me about, asking them to stop and smell the roses, to appreciate things. I took it the opposite way, and I walked them through each sense, and I said, eyes. What do we see that's beautiful? And everybody, the flowers and, the dog, the cute dog, and the sunset, and the clouds, and the waterfall, the fountain, all these things that were on their property right there that they didn't have to go more than 10 feet for, right? I mean, maybe a little further. And then went to the ears, and we talked about all the sounds that they appreciate, all the smells, all the taste. The smells and taste was great because then we all got hungry talking about ice cream and pizza, all the things that we love. And so in that moment, everybody was happy. Because what were they focused on? What were they focused on? Pleasantries, things they enjoy, things that they can feel grateful for and appreciate. How much of your day do you stop and find gratitude and appreciation in all of those things? Most people, it's not much. I mean, I think you were here last week, maybe, when I challenged everybody next time, for those of you who are in therapy, which is probably about half of you, and the other half are therapists, and half of you are in therapy. But next time you go to your therapist, were you here last time I said this? Sit down with them, and for an hour, instead of telling them everything that's wrong with you, tell them all the things that are wonderful about you and your life. They'll be shocked, confused, But we don't focus on those things. So back to the question of why is it so hard? One of the reasons is we spend all the time focused on all the things that are miserable in our lives. One of my favorite Zen expressions says, to a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish. And so wherever you put your attention and your focus all day long with all of your senses, that's how you're going to feel. Now, yes, ultimately, the practice is to go beyond the senses and not have to spend all of our time looking at and smelling and tasting and touching all the things that we enjoy. But we're not there to some extent, or to complete whatever that means. We're still stuck in the craving and the desire realm. But if you are still stuck in the craving and the desire realm, which is probably everybody in this room, then at least appreciate what we have. And then we can go through our day and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm miserable and depressed, but man, at least I'm here. At least I have the ability to smile while I'm miserable and depressed. At least I can find humor. I mean, for me early on, I would just laugh at how miserable, when I started this practice and I was still miserable and depressed, then I would just laugh at how miserable and depressed I was. But then that Buddhist teachings of impermanence kicks in, and you're like, this ain't gonna stay. This will pass. It'll be back in like 3 hours, but it'll still pass, right? So appreciation for each moment, no matter how miserable it is, because we're there to experience it. I don't know if that helps, but yeah. Stop going to Sunday; it'll ruin you. Yeah.
I remember one day I decided to appreciate nature, and I started off with insects. I had this moment where I was walking along the path while I was going for a walk one day, and a bumblebee flew up to me, and then I didn't notice it at first because I just was like, okay, great, it's a bumblebee. But then 2 more flew up next to me, and then I stopped, and there were 5 in total. Now my first reaction was to swat them, but I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So then that will give the inclination that they're going to sting me. So I just stayed there. I just stood there and didn't do anything, and I just said hi. And then they got closer, and they all just flew away at once.
Yeah. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I like bees.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It was crazy because I never experienced that ever, and then when I actually did, I was like,
Yeah.
it's a lot of patience.
Yeah. Often people ask when we talk about non-harming, and they ask about, well, what if I have lots of ants? What do I do? And my response always is, well, did you ask them to leave? See if they'll leave. What else? Questions? Yeah.
The thinking good thoughts, doing good deeds, is there a difference between that and sort of the, what I would call it kind of pop culture psychology around thinking grow rich or smiling so happy or?
Yes, there is. Huge difference. Yeah. Good question. So the question for those who didn't hear it was the first thing you referenced was what I said earlier, the teaching of think good thoughts and speak good words and do good deeds. Is there a difference from that in kind of this pop culture, think and grow rich and all that kind of stuff? Absolutely. This idea of thinking good thoughts and speaking good words and doing good deeds is really, first and foremost, critical that we bring the Buddhist teachings of non-attachment to those 3 actions. All those 3 actions are coming from, so the Buddhist teachings on karma. The word karma literally means action. Karma is not what goes around comes around. Karma is not getting what you deserve. It's the most misinterpreted Buddhist word, at least in English, where we have this idea that, we do good, we get good. If we do bad, we get bad. Or, people say, well, that's their karma. They're going to get what's coming to them. That's a very selfish view of karma, as if it only has to do with ourselves. You ever done anything bad and had something good happen? You ever done anything good and had something bad happen? So it's not this cyclical thing. Karma is what we bring into the world. Karma is like when you play pool and you hit the cue ball into the rack, and the rack goes in a million different directions every time you hit that cue ball. We are the cue ball. Every person, place, and thing we encounter, we leave an imprint. So the teachings around think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds, those are the 3 ways that we generate karma, as the Buddha taught: body, speech, mind. Thoughts, words, and actions. So the practice is to think good thoughts, speak good words, and do good deeds. Done. End of story. Not with any expectation or desire of anything to come from it. So as you say, this idea of thinking, this kind of manifestation of, well, I'm just going to think all this good stuff and then good stuff's going to happen. You know how much bad stuff has happened to me over the years while I've been trying to think good stuff? It's not that way. We don't think and speak and do for the hope that good is going to happen to us. The non-attachment piece is we bring kind thoughts, kind words, and kind actions into the world to create a kinder, gentler world for us and those around us. But it doesn't always work that way. So it's really that kind of no strings attached idea. Does that make sense? No? You want me to say it a different way to make it make more sense? What are you still attached to? What are you stuck on?
Oh, God, what am I still attached to?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, how did that not clarify the question? Because I could think all day long about money. I ain't getting rich.
I don't process that fast, so I'll have to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not if I sit here and think and I have this intention that I'm going to get all this stuff, that stuff's going to happen. I could sit here all day long and think a red Ferrari is going to show up outside, and that red Ferrari is never going to show up. If I want the red Ferrari to show up, then I better go do every single thing required for that to happen. That's karma. That's action. It's putting things into play. It's not just thinking and hoping that things happen. Yeah. Yes, there's a question here. Yeah, it's always the danger when I say something about me and they want to know more. So the question is, can you tell us a little bit more about how meditation has transformed your mindset and self-esteem over years of practice? Yeah, I mean, the self-esteem is, that for me was never much of a problem. I've kind of always been a cocky, arrogant kid. So, self-esteem wasn't so much an issue with me. I mean, growing up a short guy, like early on, you had to deal with being a short guy. Then I was like, I kind of embraced just being a short dude. So I owned that and that didn't bother me. But self-esteem issues were never really my thing. But as far as the mindset, yeah, I mean, I grew up angry, miserable, and depressed and punched people constantly. I mean, I was always in fights, and I'm not, that's the truth. I was constantly fighting. And if someone said something I didn't like, depending upon the situation where it was, I'd punch them. If it was in younger years and teenager years, in high school or at parties, or then later at, bars and social settings. If anybody looked at me or somebody, I was with, I didn't like, then I'd confront them and just a punk. I mean, I was a punk. Always angry, always pissed off, always fighting. Was an absolute bully from super young age. I mean, that was my life. And, I recognize that people kind of look at me and they see the world I'm in now. And they're like, no, not you. Yes. Like beyond whatever you're imagining, I was worse than that. I guarantee it. And so this practice absolutely transformed my life in ways that I can't even begin to speak about truly. Because, once you stop thinking that the whole world revolves around you and that everything has to happen your way, your life will drastically shift. And once you kind of take ownership and accountability for how harmful your thoughts and words and actions can actually be, your life will absolutely shift. Once you stop putting yourself in situations that can cause harm, your life will shift. And so, but truly it wasn't, it's also one of kind of, I think, the challenges with meditation in the Western culture. It wasn't the meditation. I mean, your question was how meditation has transformed your mindset. Meditation didn't transform my mindset. The Buddhist teachings around loving kindness and compassion, around non-attachment, around emptiness, around non-self, the Buddhist teachings around understanding that greed and anger and ignorance cause suffering, the Buddhist teachings around generosity and compassion and wisdom lead to the end of suffering. That's what transformed my mind, not meditation. Too many people come into this practice thinking, let's just meditate. Why? What are you even doing? I mean, if you're being really honest, which this practice requires, if you're actually going to, cultivate change, most people, and I recognize I risk offending somebody here, so my apologies in advance, but most people are just sitting there thinking, sleeping, thinking, sleeping, maybe 3 seconds of sensation of breath, then back to thinking, then sleeping, then back to sensation of breath, waiting for the bell to hit, thinking, sleeping, back to sensation of breath. How is that changing your life? Most people think it's meditation. As Karmalekchi Somo, Tibetan Buddhist nun, she always said that this mindfulness practice, big in Western, cultures, go meditate. She would say you could mindfully rob a bank and you could mindfully murder somebody. Mindfulness without moral, ethical conduct and behavior doesn't get you so far. And as I like to say from my own personal experience, an angry person who meditates is just an angry meditator. So meditation is not the be-all, end-all. It's not the fix. It is incredibly important because everything I mentioned requires the practice of just sitting and being. I am enough sitting and being. I don't need anything, sitting and being. I don't have any word. It's the same thing I say 1,000 times. Nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Is that ever enough for you? Like, those words are really important. Nowhere else to go, no one else to be, nothing else to do. When in your life can you feel that way? In that moment, what is ever enough? And what those words and that practice of sitting and breathing is teaching us is to cut through the craving and desire. Because what did the Buddha say the root cause of our suffering is? Craving and desire. So the sitting and breathing creates space for you to say, in this moment, I don't need anything. But if you're just sitting there thinking about all the things you need and want, what has it done for you? So it really isn't the meditation practice. I mean, the meditation practice is critical. To know that sitting and breathing, you don't need anything else. You don't need to be anyone else. You don't have to go anywhere else. That's the starting point. But it's how you integrate these teachings into everything in your life where it begins to change. What else? Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little bit about right speech?
Yeah, right speech. Say again?
Dharmabumtemple.
Yeah. Your Pali's getting pretty good there. So right speech. In the Eightfold Path, which is the fourth of the Noble Truths. So the first one is that life is filled with suffering, dukkha. The second is the cause, greed, anger, ignorance. The third is the ending of suffering. And the fourth is the path. And this is the Eightfold Path, right? Having correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. These are the steps. The Buddha made it very clear. 8 steps. All on Google for free, right? It's all right there. So this practice of right speech, a few people will talk about it different ways, but one of the things that I like to look at is, well, first and foremost, gossip. How many of you gossip? I don't need to show of hands. I already know the answer to that, right? Because lying is also one of them. So if you didn't raise your hand at gossip, then you would have been lying. So, but do we gossip? The Buddha was very clear. Do not gossip. Do not slander others. How many of you talk poorly about others? Do not use divisive speech. In your speech, are you trying to create a divide and conflict? So right there, do not gossip, do not slander, do not use divisive speech. In your speech, is it necessary? Is it timely? And is it, again, coming back to this truthfulness? Behind all of that with right speech is to ask yourself of everything on the Eightfold Path is, what is the intention? Beyond just gossip and slander and divisive speech, and is it necessary and timely and true? What is the intention behind it? Meaning, why am I even saying this? So if we begin to ask ourselves when we use speech, and I like to look today, especially with kind of this technology age we're in, it's beyond just, verbal communication. It's every text, every post, every tweet, everything. People are communicating constantly. So I look at right speech as equally as important as things we put online and in text communication as well. But what's the intention behind it? And is the intention behind the things we say, is it to get what we want? Or is it expressing something that isn't about me? And when you begin to use that as a filter, man, it's tough. Because so much of our communication is to what? Manipulate. What else?
To be right.
To be right. What else? Why else do we communicate? One more. Yeah, that's it right there, but one more. To manipulate, to be right, and what?
Seek approval.
To seek approval. To convince. manipulate in a way.
To understand.
Say again?
To understand.
To understand, absolutely.
Understood.
Yeah. So communication and why we speak, again, the intention. So to understand and be understood is very different from manipulate and those types of things. So communication used wisely and compassionately is critical. Communication is, to me, the foundation of understanding every conflict. Also part which, right, speech also, to me, when you kind of expand on it, includes the ability to listen. Right? Do we listen to understand? Or do we listen just to, right? I mean, ask yourself, last time you were in an argument and the other person is talking to you, are you listening to hear them? Or are you listening to just quickly come back with your answer? So I think listening also is a really big part of that. But yeah, it's critical. And then even if we look at, the three poisons of greed, anger, ignorance, and you overcome with generosity, compassion, and wisdom, are the words that we say, are they generous in nature? Are they compassionate in nature? And are they wise, meaning, to the wisest of our ability where it's not all about me? So are the words we speaking, are the words that we are speaking, are they compassionate? Are they loving? Are they kind? Are they gentle? Or are they filled with, hatred and resentment and criticism and judgments? The best way to make sure you don't say things harmful? Silence. Silence is golden, my friends. Then you're just stuck with your thoughts. But yeah. So, right speech. Yeah.
You say you can go back to being driven, successful, motivated. Isn't driven kind of extreme though, like a recipe for misery?
When you say the first part, what do you mean? Expand on that. When you say, I say you can go back to that. What do you mean by that? You kind of lost me there.
Well, that you can still do all the things that you were doing before, but maybe, be more still and quiet and
Sure.
peaceful.
And so then the question is being driven.
Driven is pretty extreme. I don't see how to be still and peaceful.
I think that there's a balance, and really it's a very unique individual situation to where I believe that you can be incredibly driven and motivated and still be peaceful and calm. I mean, look at the Buddha's life, right? He had what they call the awakening at 35 years old. He didn't spend the next 45 years sitting down silently under a tree and ignoring people. He had to be pretty driven to wake up every single day for 45 years and walk around India and teach people. That's a lot of motivation. That's a lot of inspiration. That's a lot of effort. That's a lot of, the 6 Paramitas, the Bodhisattva practice of generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. So now we as individuals, or in your mind, maybe you can't see it because you're not sure how to get there yet. But I would believe, based on the Buddha's life, I would consider him an incredibly driven, motivated, activist, inspirational rebel in how he lived.
But I think the word would have to be qualified then.
The word driven?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think we're talking about semantics, and maybe the way you're defining driven depends what you're driven towards. And then, of course, the intention behind what you're driven by. If you're driven to bring loving kindness and compassion to the world, sounds pretty good. If you're driven to, make a bunch of money so you can buy, a bunch of stuff just so you can feed your ego, well, then there's your ego. So I think it really depends on what driven means to you and how you play that out. Again, coming back to the intention.
Was the Buddha considered a bodhisattva?
So the question was the Buddha considered a bodhisattva? Depends on what scholar you ask, right? Technically, when the Buddha, the technical definition of a bodhisattva is one that vows, or a definition of the bodhisattva is one that vows to be reborn life after life until all sentient beings are free from suffering. Now, when the Buddha died, I love bringing up rebirth questions right as we're about to close. So when the Buddha died, I'm not going to turn this into a long rebirth talk, but at the time of India, everybody for the most part believed in rebirth 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ. If you walked up to somebody then and said you got one life and then you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were crazy. Fast forward to today, you tell people you're going to be reborn and they think you're nuts. So at that time, this rebirth, this reincarnation, this continuation of consciousness was just the way. By definition, the Bodhisattva vows to be reborn life after life until all beings are free from suffering. Yet, Siddhartha Gautama, who became called the Buddha, when he died, they say he entered into what's called parinirvana, meaning nirvana without remainder, meaning no more rebirth. Because what the Buddha was actually teaching, how many of you came here tonight, many of you have heard this question, because you wanted to make sure you're not reborn? Right? I mean, did your wife ask you to have pot pie and then come here to make sure you don't have a rebirth? No, it wasn't in the description, right? Not even close, right? So people, Western Buddhists, we're not into this because we want to make sure we're not reborn. But you know why the Buddha was teaching? He was teaching to liberate all sentient beings from suffering. And you know the only way to free yourself from suffering at that time was what? What guaranteed suffering? Not being dead.
I'm sorry, the previous question was being dead. The only guarantee no suffering is not being alive.
There you go, not being born.
Yes.
It's not being born. So when the Buddha was teaching, what he was actually teaching was teaching people how to free themselves from the cycle of rebirth. Because once we're born, we're guaranteed to experience suffering. So that's what he was teaching. He died. They say that was the last rebirth. However, they do say that in his life just prior to being born as Siddhartha Gautama, that he was a bodhisattva in that life, where he fed himself to a mother bear that was starving to death. Moral of the story, do not feed yourself to bears. I just want to put that disclaimer. But they say that he was a child, again, coming back to right speech, they said he was a child and there was a mother bear with cubs dying and malnourished. And so the child told everybody to go get help, fed himself to the mother bear. Mother bear then had enough nourishment to feed her cubs. They say his very next life, he was reborn as Siddhartha Gautama. Right? Bodhisattva teachings really come about 500 years later within the Mahayana school of Buddhism, which is well after the death of the Buddha. Do I think that the Buddha was a bodhisattva? Absolutely. What do I know? I'm just some Dharma Bum. Yeah, we're going to close, so it's a quick one.
I don't know. Is the rebirth necessarily on this plane, or can it be on a different plane, a multiverse?
Doesn't even matter. Yeah, forget about. So the best way to explain rebirth in 30 seconds, and I would say this in 5 minutes as well, but this is the best answer for it, is it doesn't matter. If you believe in rebirth or reincarnation or going to heaven or going to hell or all that kind of stuff, what determines all of that? What determines where you go next? Your actions. When? Now. So if I'm going to heaven, if I'm going to hell, if I'm going to be reborn, all I can focus on is what I do now. I spend zero time thinking about the cycle and process of rebirth other than when y'all ask about it. Yeah. So, yeah. I'm going to join Paul and close on that. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May this merit be transferred to those who need it most. All right, before y'all head out, our Dharma Bum host Hazel has a few announcements for y'all.
Hello.
We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay closed and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thank you.